Thank you. They gave me a platform to stand on because I'm a little short on one end. Hi, my name is Patti C, and I am a grateful member of the Al-Anon Fellowship and Al-Anon. I'd like to welcome you here tonight. My home group is over in Arlington. It meets Tuesday night at 7:30, and we have Al-Anon over there too. I'd also like to thank Luis for inviting me to come tonight, and the No Reservation Committee here for putting this on for us. The speaker meeting has been real special to my husband and I. We've been coming here for 10 years before we got married as a date night, and then ever since. So it's really special. Thank you for allowing me to come up here and share my experience, strength, and hope with you. So my first, my first meeting was January 23rd, 2014. So I've been coming for 10 years now. My first meeting was very special. It was different. It never ceases to amaze me how people arrive in these fellowships. I was actually invited to come. A friend of mine asked me if I would come. Her mother bring her mother, because her mother was living with an alcoholic, which was her brother. And so I asked her, and she said that she would come. Well, when we got to this meeting, I panicked right before I walked into the door, because the thought occurred to me that maybe I wouldn't be welcome there. My friend that I brought went on ahead of me, and when the fellow that was welcoming us, named Bob, came to me, I asked him to come down, and I whispered in his ear, "I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be here or not, because I'm an alcoholic." And he said, "Oh, no," he said, "you're a double winner." He said, "Come on in," And the reason I share that with you is because if there's anyone out here that is an alcoholic and they're questioning whether or not that they would be welcome to come to an Al-Anon meeting, please come. Because like I said, I've been coming all these years. I have never once, no matter what meeting I've gone to, have not been more than welcome in Al-Anon. Are there any new Al-Anon members here tonight, or Al-Anon? Some? No? Well, okay. Great. When I first started sharing, I didn't realize how spiritually bankrupt I really was. I had spent my whole life trying to run the show, trying to control people, trying to fix everything, and I was just miserable, and I didn't know that. And like I said, I was bringing my friend. I didn't even know that I needed it. As time went on, I realized just how sick I was and how much I needed it. Shortly after I started coming, they had a big book, not a big book study. They had a study in Al-Anon of the steps and traditions, and that was really helpful as well. And I started seeing how I was powerless over the alcoholic and powerless over my friends that were alcoholic too. Well, I'm just going to share with you in a general way what it was like before and what happened and what it was like now. I grew up in Everett. We were in the city, but all of our relatives were country people. My dad grew up on a dairy farm and in the Stanwood, Arlington area were our relatives, and my mom, her family were country people as well. They were more into hunting and fishing and that. So even though us kids were in the city, we often went out to the farms and helped with all the work. And we always got together with these relatives and on the holidays and birthdays and that. And there was always at least a couple fifths or a half a gallon of whiskey on the counter there in the kitchen. And everyone always got along. They worked hard, they played cribbage, they laughed, they had fun. All the time growing up, I honestly never saw one person argue, even though they were drinking, and apparently, not too much, I guess. And it just, to me, alcoholism looked like fun, or alcoholism. Drinking looked like fun, I guess what I'm trying to say. And it just looked like fun growing up. I didn't know at the time that I was actually in a family with two alcoholics. One was my mother and the other was my older brother. Now, my older brother and I were adopted into a family, this very loving family. My mom and dad, they were married 56 years. I rarely even saw them not get along. They must have taken their issues aside from us kids or something, because we didn't see that anything out of the ordinary. They loved each other a lot. My dad took my mom out every week for a date, and they drank. They drank moderately, I suppose. My mom later crossed over the line, and she became, to me, the what you would call that big pink elephant that's in the room, where we were already older and married and moved away as kids, and we'd come over to visit, and she just wasn't acting right. She just wasn't the same. For one thing, she was repeating herself all the time. And so we kind of all tiptoed around this mom that was acting different. And then later she did go to treatment. The family did a family intervention, and I wasn't asked to be a part of that because I was a stoner at that time, and it was a hippie movement and sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and so they didn't invite me in with that part. But I did go to when my mom went to treatment, I did come and visit her when she was in the detox, I think, because she was in that room by herself, and I came in and she said, Patti, she said, would you get the bottle out of the cupboard behind you? Okay, and I looked behind me, and there wasn't anything back there but the wall, and I think that's the DTs possibly. I mean, I wasn't sure, but anyway, she finished that treatment and came home and continued to pour my dad his drink, and she never drank again, and she died sober at 88 years old. So the other alcoholic in the family was my older brother. He just, like I said, I don't know, I think both of us were probably born that way. I don't know. We don't know. Neither of us ever knew our family background, our real parents or anything. They adopted us when we were babies, and so we never learned anything different. But he was different. I mean, he just was. I don't know what word to even describe him, other than that he just didn't seem to have a conscience. And I grew up always looking over my shoulder to see where he was. I had a lot of secrets. I tried my best not to ever tell on him, because I was afraid that if anybody knew all the stuff he was doing, that he would be removed from the home, and I would probably be removed with him. So I just kept things quiet. He later went to treatment, and when he left, he asked me if I would drive him over. He was going to Monroe, and he'd got in trouble. He'd wrecked a car, and I think the judge told him to either go to treatment or go to jail or something. So anyway, he gave me the key to his apartment, and he said, would you water the plants and feed the cat while I'm gone, and come pick me up at the end? I said, sure, I'd be happy to. What he didn't ask me to do was pour out all the booze that he had in the house, which I did. I was just sure that it was my job to rescue him so that when he got back home, he wouldn't have this problem there. Not thinking that he knew that all was there before he left, and he probably had plans for it. But, I took it upon myself to take his responsibility. And so, of course, when he got back, he was very unhappy. And, we didn't talk to each other for quite a long time. Then my first husband was an alcoholic. I first met him, I was 12, he was 14, and he had his own car. And we were out in the country, and my folks had a summer place out at Lake Goodman, and I met him out there, and he told me when he was 15 that he was an alcoholic, and the only thing I knew about that was that he wrecked a lot of cars. That's all I knew about being an alcoholic. And so anyway, we were married and had the kids and that, and I don't know, the marriage lasted a while, and then it didn't, and just, divorce is a hard thing to go through for anyone. And to be honest with you, he's been my neighbor for 35 years. And it's worked out. We separated our property, and he married a wonderful bartender, and they've been happy ever since. And she's a great gal, and they're perfect for each other. So I was happy for him at that. When I started speaking in my meetings, and sharing, I didn't realize I had so much anxiety. I know when I would get called on, I was eating talk this, and I was just full of myself, I'm sure, but full of the anxiety. And I remember right around that time too, my son that had been a nurse, probably, close to 20 years maybe then, or somewhere in there, and he said to me, registered nurse, and he says, Mom, one day he was over, he says, Mom, he says, I just can't believe that with all your anxiety, you've never had to have any medication for it. And I said, anxiety? I said, I don't have any anxiety. I said, I've never had anxiety, because I didn't notice it. I didn't know what it was. I didn't even recognize it, because I believe I'd had it my whole life, and I think that's what was normal to me. That's just how I was. So anyway, as time went on in these meetings, I was learning, as time went on, that I was powerless over the alcoholic. But it was a process. It wasn't something that happened right away. Now, this one particular time, when I first came in there, it was my youngest daughter that I was really worried about. And so that's mostly what I had shared about. So this one particular time, I not at the meeting, but I was house sitting for somebody, and I was just having this meltdown. I was just, at my wit's end. And I thought, aha, the phone list. Had it in my purse, so I got it out. And so I looked through, and I called this woman, and she didn't answer, and the next woman didn't answer. Next one didn't. Finally, this man answered, and it was Craig. If any of you know Craig from the Arlington group. And I said, Craig, this is what's going on. I said, oh my gosh, this and that, and I carried on, and he just listened. And when I was done explaining everything, he said to me, he says, Patty, what are you having for dinner? Dinner? And he wasn't saying that to hit on me. Honestly, it wasn't that. I said, dinner? I said, well, I'm house sitting. I'm at this house, and I don't know, I think I'm having chicken or something or other. And he said, okay. He said, that's the only thing that you need to be concerned with right now. That's it. Don't just let go of all this other stuff that you're all anxious about with your daughter. Just let it go. And all you need to worry about is that dinner. And it worked. I went from a 10 clear down to probably a 1, and I thought, he's right. I can't control her. I just have to let it go, and it was really helpful. So as time went on, it was just tough. I had this younger daughter. She had been married. Of course, your kids, you watch them grow up, and you watch them get married and hope for the best for them. And she married an alcoholic, and they got into all kinds of stuff. And this one particular time, the husband shot a gun over at the neighbor, and so he went to prison for 5 years. And they had already had some domestic violence in their home, and she left. They got a divorce, and she later got married, and then moved the 3 kids and the husband. They moved over to Boise area, and so I didn't see her that often anymore. But I did go up. I did go up at least twice a month, and I visited my son-in-law in prison. And my oldest daughter would say to me, "Mom, why do you go see him?" And I said, he's still the father to my grandchildren. And to be honest with you, I knew it for the grace of God, there go I, okay? I love to get behind the wheel and drink and drive and do different things myself. So we kept that relationship going, and of course I kept the relationship going with my daughter in Boise. Well, one day she called me and she said, "Mom, I got some bad news." She said, we're getting a divorce, and she said, I called CPS, and I put the 3 kids in foster care, and I'm moving out of the house. I didn't know she was going to move out of the house into her car, but basically that's where she went. And so the next time I flew over there, she came in her car and picked me up, and it was just it was devastating to see this. And but I knew that I couldn't fix her. It was a choice that she was making. And you know how the alcoholics are, they act and Al-Anon react, right? We learned that. So anyway, I visited, and then I came back home. Well, one day she called me and she said, Mom, I've come down to Vancouver, but I've had an accident, and I had this lady that was living in this house poured some acid in my leg. Well, she had also got into meth too, so I don't know what all happened and what all she was telling me was the truth, or however. Anyway, she said, I'm in the hospital. Will you come and visit me? And I said, of course I will. So I went down to see her. And I tell you, this is where I realized that when I look back on this and I see how codependent I had become. And if you know what codependence is, it's living your life through somebody else. And that's where I was, and I had no idea. And when I got down there, she's in that hospital room in that bed with her leg all bandaged up, and we're visiting a couple hours, and all of a sudden she says, Mom, I miss Alan. I've got to see Alan, her boyfriend. And anytime a mother hears their kids crying, it still affects them, even though she was 40 probably by then. And it was Alan, and I just, she goes, please take me to see Alan. Okay, get out of bed. So she got out of bed and got the walker. Sure enough, I let her get out of that hospital room, took her, we went downstairs, got into the car, and I drove her over to Alan's. We went into this place, and this old apartment, nothing there but a mattress on the floor, and this Alan was stirring. That's all I don't even know if he knew I was there or not. And I managed to get her back from there, and got back up into the hospital bed, and they didn't know that I had even taken her out. And oh my gosh, I tell you, some of the things I did, it's just really embarrassing. Didn't mention it, but it's the truth, right? So I was really spiritually bankrupt. I was trying to run the show, and just not realizing how much the God of my understanding really wanted to help me. So anyway, she came from there, and actually she went to prison for 8 months. She was getting criminally involved, and she was moving around. And on my computer at home, up at the very top of the bar, I had Ada County, Clark County, Multnomah County, Whatcom County. So anytime I could just click up on that button, I could check the roster, and I could see if she was in jail or not, And if she was in jail, it was good, because I knew that she wasn't drinking, she wasn't using, it was all right, Well, and then, of course, she'd get back out, and away we'd go again. So time went on, and we tried. I married my husband. We met in Al-Anon. I was so grateful that he had gone through the steps, and I had gone through the steps, because it really helped us both. We were partners with this. Where I started to weaken, he would remind me of different things, and so we had her, live with us a couple different times. My husband said, Patty, we have to have a contract here. That's all there is to it. She's sober now, but it doesn't mean she's going to stay that way. So yeah, she signed the contract, and that would last for a short time, and then she'd be gone. She'd be out there and doing her thing, and we'd say, okay, I'm sorry, but you've got to go. And as hard as it was for me and him too, we stuck to our guns, and she left. The last time she left the house, she had taken one of those real big fire extinguishers, and she had let it all off in our beautiful RV that my husband had bought before we got married. Just covered the whole thing in an inch of that gray dust, and left. And that was one of my bottoms. I said, okay, that's it. How can you help somebody that doesn't want to really help themselves, and they're just going to hurt you, the longer that you're trying to control and trying to fix them. So anyway, 3 months went by, and I got a letter in the mail, and it said that she had gone to a walk-in clinic or something up in Bellingham. And she had gone to a treatment center up there during the part of the time when she was with us. She had gone up to PCN, 6 weeks up there, and they had told her, I heard him tell her that if you have any problems, you're always welcome to come back here. Well, she never went back. So anyway, I got this letter, and 3 months had gone by, and I thought, maybe I'll just go up there and see how she's doing. And I had no idea where she was, and Bellingham is a pretty big city. But you know what? I found her. And she had been in and out at the drop-in center, and she was basically on the streets then, and she was coming in and sleeping there, and they feed people there. And so for 2 years, I went up there, and every Tuesday, I would go up there, I'd drive an hour up, we'd spend about an hour together, and then and before I left and came back home, I always stopped at the Bellingham group on Railroad there for an AA meeting. It was a nooner, and I always kind of got my head back on my shoulders before I came back. And what Al-Anon gave me through all that was an opportunity to be with her and to just see her. It was on her terms. Sure, a lot of times, most of the time she was high. She got to where she couldn't even put a sentence together hardly, but I just accepted that, and it was beautiful for me, so anyway, we did that. On Tuesdays, I knew where I could find her because this church fed the homeless people there. Well, I came up at Christmas and I gave her her present, and then I came up the following Tuesday and she gave me mine. It was a slightly used little jacket that I cherish very much. I need that water. Where? Oh, here, thank you. Okay, so, anyway, okay, just a second, excuse me. Okay, so, one more. I came up again the next week and the week after that, and she wasn't around anywhere, and her friends didn't know where she was. So I put in to the police department a missing person. 5 months later, a sheriff came up to our house and told her that she had been found in an abandoned RV, and she had lost her life. And they had a person of interest, but it was never found. So that's been 4 years ago now, and COVID had taken over, and so I took care of all the arrangements, and then now she's buried in Savannah with my mom and dad and grandma and grandpa. So then Al-Anon helped me through all of that, through acceptance. I'm sure I was part of the problem. I was an alcoholic myself. There was many times I didn't set good examples. I probably passed on the gene of alcoholism to her and that, but honestly, the solution was in her hands, and I knew that. And so the next person I want to mention is my son. My son just lived a couple acres over from us, and he had been a registered nurse for 20 years. He had worked in Everett, and he had got in trouble with the hospital there. He got into obituates there, and called me one time and he said, "Mom, I think I'm going to lose my license." So he thought he was going to lose his license. But in the medical field, they have what they call a WHOOPS program, and so he later called me and he said that he was going to join that. And for 6 years, he was in that program. He went to meetings and he went to UAs and he kept his license. And then he got a job at the Evergreen Treatment Center, Drug and Alcohol Treatment Center, and then the last 10 years about at the Monroe Drug and Alcohol Treatment Center. And he loved his job, loved it with a passion. And he had 4 kids. and my daughter has three kids. And so he, about this time, 2 years ago, he had gone through a divorce, and he had married an alcoholic, and I know he was having a hard time with her, and I think she was sober at the time they got married, and they had a good marriage for a while, and then it went south, and then they got a divorce. And he told me, like I said, about 2 years ago, that it was a surprise to me, and he said, I bought a condo down in New Orleans, and I didn't even know he had been to New Orleans before. I never had. And he wanted to know if I could come and see it. And, and I said, sure, I'd love to. So we flew down together, and this was a beautiful place. And I noticed when he was down there, he was drinking. But thanks to Al-Anon, I had learned that what he was doing wasn't my business. It wasn't my place to say, do you really think you should be doing this? I kept it zipped. And because of that, we had a great time together. We had some really nice, we went to a couple bars, and saw some really good jazz players and that sort of thing. And then I came back home. And then the Mardi Gras was starting February down there, and the Mardi Gras was starting. And nurses, they work several days on, then they have several days off. So on his days off, he was flying down there. So this Mardi Gras was starting, and so he went down there, and for that, and then this was like about 2 weeks after I come home, and I got a phone call from his sister that he had died. And so I had been the only one that had been down there. I didn't know what happened or what had gone on. So my husband came with me, and we flew down there and spent a week down there, taking care of the condo, and it was all furnished and whatnot. And we went to a meeting every day. We Googled where a meeting was. We didn't have a car, but we could walk over. It was within a mile. And this meeting place had several different kinds of meetings there, so it was just perfect. But we walked in that condo, to my right, I could see where he had lost his life. And, of course, I'm just in shock and in grief. And my husband said, look over there on the coffee table. And on the coffee table was a rolled up dollar bill and some white residue. And in all honesty, when I saw that, the first thing that came to mind was, aha, that would make me happy right there. And I didn't touch it. We got rid of it right away. But it was interesting to me how quickly that thought came to mind, and I found out later that that's how he had lost his life, because on the coroner report, it said that it was an overdose of cocaine and fentanyl, and with the alcohol. And so many of us, we do get emotionally, emotionally in trouble. And we have to go through some horrible things. But I'm so grateful for this program, because I learned what I could do and what I couldn't do. And that I was powerless over the alcoholic, and powerless over other people, places, and things. I couldn't change anything. I didn't cause it. And I want you to know that I never blame God for any of this, ever. The thought never even crossed my mind, and still hasn't. I have a loving God today, a loving God. And he's not one of these, ones like that. And I also know that he allowed for this to happen. And he, through acceptance of a God of my understanding, he's allowed me to accept this. And I'm really grateful for that. I learned in here that I had to be honest. I had to be open-mindedness, have that. And I had to be willing to do the work. And it's just been amazing. There's a fellow one time told me, he said, you can't think your way into a new way of living. You have to live your way into a new way of thinking. And that's doing the work. So I want to thank you again. I want to end with a real special note. I don't know how my time is. I'm good. My husband and I are both on our 5th marriage. Yeah. Relationships weren't our winning point. And we've been happily married for 9.5 years. Yes. What we did before we got married, we met in Al-Anon. He asked me after 6 months or so, would I marry him? And I asked him, I said, well, would you be willing to have some marriage counseling? Now, I had never had that before. I never thought I needed it. But the thought came that maybe I would now. And so he said yes. And so the pastor at his church said he would do this for us. So we came and he said when we got there, he said, I'd like you to take a test online, separate. And so we did. And what this test was, it showed 7 areas on how well we would be, that word just left me. Compatible, thank you. Yes, compatible. And so we took the test and we came back a week later. We were so anxious to find out if we were going to, make it. And right? And he said, oh my goodness, he said, sit down. He said, I've got your results. Of the 7 categories, he said, let me tell you something. He said, you both scored higher than my wife and I. You both scored higher than any couple I have ever given this test to. Of the 5 categories, we scored 100%. Of the 7 categories, 5 of them we scored 100%. On the 6th one, we scored 90%. On the 7th, 70% of budgeting. And we still kind of flicker on that one a little bit. So I just want to end with a thank you. So if any of you ever get concerned, want to control or whatever, just remember all you have to worry about is what you're going to have for dinner.